Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Friday, November 7th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So guys, Politico is reporting this morning that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now privately telling his confidants that Vice President J.D. Vance is in fact the front runner for the 2028 Republican nomination. This is according to two unnamed sources in Politico. So, Tom, these sorts of stories don't just appear out of nowhere. We know that. What do you think is going on here?
Are those sources from the vice president's office? Is that?
Well, that's the question. What do you think is going on, and what do you think Marco Rubio's thinking?
Well, look, I think everybody understands that J.D. Vance is the guy who's in the driver's seat. He's the vice president of the United States, so he's the heir apparent. I think that's pretty clear. Although Trump has gone out of his way to praise Marco Rubio and even suggest that the two of them be paired on a ticket. He did that on a gaggle on Air Force One on his way either to or from Asia recently. And I think that's Megyn Kelly has mentioned she thinks that would be a great pairing. And I think there is a lot of interest in that idea. So I think Marco, if the sources are accurate and this is actually what he's telling folks, that would make sense, because I think he would be a great vice presidential pick for that ticket. And the alternative is him running against J.D. Vance and trying to, basically, have a bloody primary in 2028. I think the Republican Party would be probably a lot better off if the two of those guys agreed, yeah, let's do this and move on.
Yeah. Well, Carl, do you see it that way? And the other thing is the timing of this. I mean, this is just days after the Democratic wave election of 2025. I think that's what people are calling it these days.
Listen, the Republicans haven't had a lot of experience with this. And you start to, you're talking about a two-term president. Now, Donald Trump's terms weren't contiguous, but if he leaves office, the Republicans had a tradition in the old days of sort of giving it to the next person in line. Usually that was the vice president, obviously. It wasn't when George W. Bush left office, because Dick Cheney had his health and his age. He made it clear he was not interested in running. But when Ronald Reagan left office, George H.W. Bush was the next person in line. The only person who challenged him seriously was Pat Buchanan. And when Dwight Eisenhower left office, now we're going back into the 1960 election, but Richard Nixon had been his vice president. He was the next man up. So there's a tradition in the GOP. Trump has sort of thrown out all the old traditions of the Lincoln Party of Lincoln, but that one kind of remains. It makes sense. So when Marco Rubio says this to friends, if he did, and look, I have no reason to doubt Politico's reporting here, but if he's saying that, he's acknowledging sort of what's pretty obvious to people. But Tom mentioned that gaggle on Air Force One where President Trump was asked about this, and he said, "Yeah, we got a couple good people," but he mentioned Rubio first, not Vance. He said, "You got a good one over there." Rubio was on the plane and nodded to him, and then sort of seeming to realize, wait, I might have just made headlines, then brought up J.D. Vance on his own. But these are I guess they're the two, first among equals, and the order can be argued about, but the logical order in the old,
can the order really be argued about? I mean, is J.D. Vance like, yeah, sure, I'll serve another term as vice president. Marco, you take the top slot. Like, that ain't gonna happen.
We've never had somebody serve 16 years as vice president or 12. That'd be kind of fun.
Not happening. And vice president is that's a promotion for Rubio.
Is it? I mean, Secretary of State
you
and
said that to
National
Andy
Security
Walworth?
Advisor is pretty good. Those are two pretty good positions.
From cabinet member to VP.
No, Tom. You think Henry Kissinger would have rather been vice president?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, I'm with Andy on this. And look, Andy's got the foreign policy degree. Andy, explain to Tom why Secretary of State and NSC is actually more power than
that would be kind of interesting if Rubio makes a calculated decision. Okay, well, if he thinks that the political landscape is such that Vance can't win, that it's just Democrats' turn, that he's not gonna the VP can't get across the finish line, that he would maybe take a pass and then set himself up to be the heir apparent for 2032. Vance would still be young enough to run again, but he would have lost. And so Rubio would have an argument, hey, JD had his shot. He didn't get it done. So now you got to turn and look at me, because obviously Rubio is still young enough to wait another cycle if he wanted to.
Yeah. So here's another theory, as long as it's Friday, we can have theories on this.
This Friday whiskey talk. We can.
I think this. Yeah. Pull up to the bar. If you think of it this way, like Vance probably is the guy in the top slot, because you're right. That's what Republicans do. I mean, you left out Bob Dole. That was the other one, right? So vice presidents tend to step up. But who gets to be the vice president is really up for grabs. And maybe in his view, he's trying to lock in that vice presidential nomination, because Vance could pick someone else as his vice presidential running mate. He may want to balance the ticket geographically.
But Andy, why would Rubio do that if it wasn't a promotion? Why would he want to do that?
Well, he may become a Tom Bevan acolyte. He may. I guess it's possible he might think that given our shrinking foreign service and our shrinking USAID and our shrinking Voice of America, that maybe it's not that much fun to be Secretary of State anymore. It used to be a lot of fun to be the Secretary of State. It's a good job. Great job.
Yeah, well,
you get your own
apropos our conversation, there's an Emerson poll out this morning, a national poll that looks at Trump's job approval, but also looks at 2028. And Vance is at 54% in terms of who Republicans say they would support for 2028. So he's got a majority support. That's up from 30% a year ago. And Rubio's, I think, at like 6. You know who's at number 2? Donald Trump.
Jr.?
7%. Don't forget. He's not going away.
No. Yeah.
Wait, is it Donald Trump Jr. or Donald Trump?
Donald Trump, the man himself. Yes,
I believe it's senior. I don't believe it's junior.
Yes. No, I think you're right. Yeah. Politico has a poll as well, as long as we're talking about polls on this. And this was taken before this week's election. It shows that among voters who pulled the lever for Trump in 2024, Vance is the choice of 35%. Rubio is at 2%. So yeah. So that might give you some idea too why Rubio would be looking to lock up that second slot.
One more note from that. I think it was about 25%, so a quarter of the Republican electorate was undecided, and there was, I think, a few percentage points for "quote unquote" other. So obviously, long way off, a lot of fluidity, but JD Vance certainly is the guy in pole position.
Well, that the people who are undecided, those are the only rational respondents in that poll. If you think about it, this is way too early for this kind of talk. But I was
not on RealClearPolitics. It's not.
But none of you picked up on my joke, though. I think if Marco Rubio is trying to solidify his position as the VP, who would he be worried about? Donald Trump Jr. Because JD Vance could pick him. That's what I. And Megyn Kelly mentioned that the other day.
Megyn mentioned the other day. Megyn said, don't count out Don Trump Jr. And by the way, Phil Wegman and I interviewed Eric Trump about his book just a couple of weeks ago. And we asked him about 2028, because he's been mentioned also as a possible, heir to the Trump dynasty. I think Don Trump Jr. is probably, if you were looking at the two sons, he would have the upper hand in that. But Eric Trump is not out of the question either.
I love fratricidal stories. That would be fun.
And it does answer the question, which really emerged out of this Tuesday's election, which is, what do Trump voters do when Trump's name is not on the ballot? Well, it looks like they don't come out the way the Republicans would like. Well, how do you get Trump's name on the ballot without having Donald himself run?
Put one of his kids there.
Put one of his kids there, right?
I was going to say don't sleep on Ivanka, but that didn't sound right.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you didn't say that. I was going to mention Laura Trump, but okay.
Yes, there are other Trumps out there that are still possibilities as well.
Melania, of course, is not eligible. She's foreign born, but
that's true.
She'd be.
You can maybe have a double Trump ticket. Can I just
also, because we're talking about this Emerson poll, we talked about Gavin Newsom yesterday and Prop 50 and the results there. So on the Democratic side,
Gavin
Newsom Yeah, I mean, he is now in the lead. He went from like 10% a year ago to like 35% now. And Kamala Harris went basically the opposite direction. She was about in the 30s a year ago and is now down in the low double digits. And so, um, this really did well. You could say Kamala Harris's book tour didn't really provide the juice that she was hoping, but certainly Gavin Newsom being out front, and I think Prop 50 really did boost his chances, at least in the short term. We'll see again.
Yeah, that's
Gosh,
what
we're
Tom
talking
thinks.
about this 3 years in advance.
That's what Tom thinks, Andy. I actually think Kamala Harris' book tour is what drove her numbers down. I don't. I think it was like the. Remember
It
the
didn't boost her; it actually hurt her. Is what you
Yeah,
said.
remember the Kristi Noem book that nearly was it?
Yeah.
Her, yeah, it nearly ended her career.
Tanked her campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, because she was like bragging about killing dogs and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So you can
Puppies.
Yeah, I don't think. This is advice I should give myself. I'm thinking of writing another book. No book tours. That's really the death knell.
Of your presidential run, Carl, you can announce that for us.
Yeah,
that would be some news.
I was just thinking of book sales, but yeah, I probably shouldn't run.
But that Emerson poll is interesting, Tom, because it does look like they've basically switched positions. If you look at their numbers, where they were, I guess, 10 months ago or a year ago, and where they are now, could have been 10 months ago, 6 months ago. It's pretty remarkable the way he has moved up. And I'm not sure, was that poll taken after Tuesday, do you know, or before Tuesday? That was the one thing I wasn't sure of when I looked.
I think it was taken before Tuesday.
Yeah, well,
so
then
you
if
would
you're
think
right, Tom, his numbers should even be higher. If Prop 50
Right.
was the driving factor there, right?
Yeah, but I mean, he has been that whole battle. He has been out in front. But interestingly, J.B. Pritzker's been doing the rounds. He was at a couple percent. He wasn't, didn't really have a lot of traction. I think Pete Buttigieg was in the high single digits, and that's about where he's been, sort of sitting in third place. So we'll see. I mean, look.
Well, shouldn't we talk about Gavin Newsom's running mate then, since we talked about J.D. Vance's running mate?
Well, first, let me point out one other thing about that poll. I think it's 35% is undecided there as well. So it is early for this sort of stuff. But boy, Carl, if you have a theory on who his running mate will be, I'd be curious to hear.
Well, I'm on record on our podcast as saying Gavin Newsom is the Democratic nominee and the most likely future president of the United States. So I probably stuck with that story. But I will say this in all seriousness: in a Democratic primary, in a Democratic presidential ticket, you will never have two white males again, and probably not just two males. I think that party, the Democrats rely on the women's vote. The gender gap is now solidified. And I think that, the obvious choice to me is Gretchen Whitmer if Gavin Newsom were the nominee. I think it'd be a strong ticket of two governors.
Two governors, two different parts of the country. Do you think too moderate for the new party?
I don't think either one of them are moderate. I think they're both, classic liberals. But you
haven't been
classic
up.
liberals.
Is the party moved so far left on economic issues that you need a communist on the ticket? I don't think we're there yet.
Tom, do you think Carl's right about that?
mean,
I have my doubts. I think we might need one.
What about Kamala Harris?
Well, then you have to forfeit California's electoral votes. I don't think they want to do that.
Oh, right. That's right. Well, she could move to
What about
DC or
AOC?
someplace.
That's Tom's candidate. Yeah.
What? No, she's not my candidate. I think Republicans are foolish to underestimate her. Whenever I mention her on X or anywhere else, people are like, "Oh, she'd be so easy to beat." Republican. Oh, she's not the brightest bulb, and all this stuff. And it's like, well, okay, but she does have pretty big following. She's good on social media, and you may think she's not the brightest bulb, but that doesn't always matter in presidential politics. I mean, I think she would be a formidable force because that's where all the energy is in the party. She'd raise tons of money, and she's already gone to all these fight the oligarchy rallies on a private jet, no less. But I wouldn't rule her out at all if she decided to run, and she might.
Well,
she doesn't
have to run. If Newsom were the nominee, the presidential nominee, he wanted to choose her. In modern politics, the only that's one vote. The presidential nominee gets to choose whoever he or she wants. And I think for the reasons you mentioned, Andy, she balances. I don't think she's an airhead. She'll be in her late 30s. She'll have been in Congress several terms. She's, there's a learning curve. She's been learning. She will represent she'd have to not be a democratic socialist of America. She'd have to sort of
I was going to say, so a San Francisco liberal in Gavin Newsom paired with a democratic socialist from New York, Bronx.
Well, it balances the ticket another way.
She's from.
New
York City.
It's the generational balancing, it's gender balancing, and it's bi-coastal. Look, they're going to carry New York anyway, but she brings in the young people. Gavin Newsom was once the darling of young Democrats when he was mayor of San Francisco and married people before it was legal who were gay. Well, those people, these voters who voted for Mamdani don't remember that, but they know AOC. I actually think Tom's. I think you may have a point there, Tom.
Well, for those of you who are new listening on the Megyn Kelly channel, a couple things you should know. Number one, we play a drinking game. Every time Carl mentions Gavin Newsom, you have to take a drink.
So you have to drink every day.
I was going to say, our old show is at like 6 p.m., so it was acceptable. Now
at 11 a.m.
might be a bit of a problem.
So before martini lunch.
Is that Carl and I often wager bottles of red wine on things. And I actually won our last bet by
the first one he'd won in 10 years. So I don't know why he's bragging.
But this presents another opportunity, Carl. I see an opportunity here for a wager that you're betting that Gavin Newsom is going to be the nominee and AOC is going to be his running mate. Is that what you're saying?
No,
for a bottle of wine.
We're not betting on this because that then would influence my coverage because I'm so competitive. So we can't bet on this, but I'm on record and I'm staking, I guess, my reputation that Gavin Newsom will be the Democratic Party nominee and that he will choose a woman as his running mate. My guess would be it would be Gretchen Whitmer, but it could be someone. It could be a person from the more progressive wing.
But you don't want to bet on that.
I don't think we should. I don't think we should, Tom. I don't think that's proper. I still write about politics. You still write about politics, and I edit you. So
it's not going to be that expensive a bottle of wine, Carl. I don't know what you think here. It's like $7.99 or something.
And domestic. It'll have to be domestic.
That's right.
It's always a California red, Andy. Always.
Right. All right, well, guys, it is Friday.
Is Boone's Farm from Napa Valley? Is that?
Can you tell? It's Friday. You're listening to Real Clear Politics, believe it or not. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon. And we're going to take a break, but we'll be back with more right after these words.
Let's pause for a moment and talk about what's happening beyond the headlines. While the stock market gets the spotlight, there's a quieter shift that's happening with real implications. Central banks are building gold reserves. The global demand for hard assets is rising. And policymakers here at home are laying the groundwork for major economic changes. American Alternative Assets is staying ahead of that curve. Their new report is called Gold's Next Move, and it shows you how to protect your savings using a gold IRA and why now is a strategic moment to act. You will also get their wealth preservation guide, and you can learn how to claim up to $10,000 in free silver. Visit tomlovesgold.com or call 855-450-GOLD. That's tomlovesgold.com or 855-450-4653. Do it today.
Some pundits are already calling this past Tuesday's election the energy election because these skyrocketing electric bills figured prominently in the campaign. New Jersey electric bills are up 20% this year. Mikey Sherrill has already promised a utility rate freeze on her first day in office. And Virginia, which is home to more data centers than any other state, in fact, it's home to a third of all the data centers worldwide. Energy figured there as well. So, Carl, fair enough. Is it a good idea to call it the energy election? Is that, in fact, what we've just had?
Well, I'm not sure about that. We had these elections in basically Democratic states, New York, New Jersey, California, Virginia, and energy was one of the issues. The candidates talked about it, but they didn't. They were too busy accusing each other of being unfit for office to spend much time on the issues, especially here in Virginia. But it clearly, I think New Jersey may be the canary in the coal mine for 2028 and beyond 2026 even, because you point out these big rate increases, big energy bill increases, and as Tom pointed out the day after the election, New Jersey was a state where President Trump made inroads. Donald Trump made inroads when he ran last year. He ran much better than he had before, and it was one reason people thought the state was in play. But it turns out if you get a higher energy bill and in a low turnout election and Democrats are voting, they just voted against they voted against the administration. Donald Trump promised to bring down inflation. He promised to address it. He inherited inflation. Inflation has gone down in some areas. Gasoline prices went down. Grocery prices have not, and energy prices have increased. So, when the voters are restive, they tend to vote against the status quo. They vote against the party in power, and that was perceived to be the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was affordability in general. I don't know that it was. Energy prices are part of that mix. New Jersey, for example, property taxes are outrageously expensive, which is also contributes to the cost of living. So I think there was some, energy, and Mamdani focused on freezing rent basically, along with his other things. So, is electricity being more expensive? Was that part of the overall mix in this election? Sure. But it falls under the umbrella of affordability and things just in general, people feeling like they don't have enough money to cover all of their bills every single month. And I think that's what Republicans have to get their heads around.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But just to try this one more time, because I think you both might be underestimating the importance of energy here. Those energy bills going up 10% across the country, 20% in places like New Jersey. We're going to see big spikes in New England this winter. That is a change, and it does seem like, I can't remember because I watched the debates. In both debates, energy prices came up. Utility bills was sort of a big part of both candidates' talking points at this point. So
we're not disagreeing with you, Andy, but it's part of a larger picture here. You have a president
part of a larger picture.
Well, but to call it the energy election, puts a little bit of extra emphasis on it, I would think, right? I'm saying it was energy.
You're not accusing me of trying to hype a segment here, are you?
A little bit.
Well, and you know what else, Andy? You have this. When President Trump came into office for the second term, you had all these executive orders and orders out of EPA and Doug Burgum, at energy, the Green New Deal. Not passed as legislation, but it became a priority of the Biden administration, and all the agencies were pushing it. And, President Trump is all in on fossil fuels. But what I think a winning message for the American people is all of the above, even nuclear. This idea that the Republicans don't like wind and solar and the Democrats don't like oil and natural gas. My guess, I think the electorate, that's not where the voters are. They want affordable, reliable, energy, and that's mainly what they want. And they're not getting it. And there's a fear that the problem's going to get worse for the reasons you mentioned, which is that AI is going to lead to more data centers, not fewer, and they require a lot of energy.
Yeah.
The data center stuff is really interesting, right? The building of these massive facilities. And Andy, you and I were talking about this the other day. There was a picture in the Wall Street Journal of this tiny town. I forget where it was. It was like Georgia or something. Mm-hmm. And it was it looked like a picture of Americana, like this little rural town. And in the distance was this huge, massive facility. It was an Amazon cloud,
right.
building and these things take up an inordinate, extraordinary amount of energy. And they're getting tax breaks to come build there, and then the idea is, or the argument is, they're raising everybody's energy and electricity bills in the process, and so there's benefits and then there are downsides to these things.
Yeah, it's hard for me to believe that they're be so bold as to pass those higher energy costs directly off to the consumers. and that the data centers don't have to somehow absorb the cost of the energy or buy, pay a fair price for the energy they're buying. But that is the argument. And it is amazing, as I said before. I mean, I didn't realize it, but Virginia has 1/3 of all the data centers in the world.
That's an amazing statistic.
Are in Virginia. That's incredible. So it is going to be a bigger issue. I think the other thing I want to ask
Government has to have a lot of facilities to spy on you. The NSA and the CIA and a lot of data they got to suck up.
That's right. But it seems that in those elections, both Chitterelli and Winsome Earl Sears both had energy plans as well. So it wasn't that they didn't. That people were sort of deciding between two plans so much as I think they were just trying to throw the bums out. I buy that.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and the exit polls showed that on the question of, who shares my values and who do you think is going to fight for me, the Democrats won in both of those states on that question, and it wasn't even that close. I mean, it was 20 or 30 points. That the Democrats did a better job of communicating to voters that they, empathized with sympathized with their concerns, and were going to do a better job of tackling those concerns than the Republicans did.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about another story, this out of the White House, which is that the president signed a deal yesterday with a couple of big pharmaceuticals to get Wegovy and another drug to
You
people
forgot
at a
the
cheaper
anti-fat
price.
drug?
No. Wegovy is the anti-fat drug.
I see.
We don't
There are a
call
number
it that.
of
It's
them,
an
yes.
obesity drug, yeah, but there's two of them. But Wegovy is the main one that I'm familiar with. Anyway, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., HHS Secretary, spoke about it. Just want you guys to hear a little bit of what he said about the reason this is important.
This is President Trump is the friend of the forgotten American. Obesity is a disease of poverty, overwhelmingly. And these drugs have only been available for people who have wealth. At one point, the majority of prescriptions, the highest concentration of prescriptions in this country was the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And what about the people who live in rural areas, who live in food deserts? What about the people in urban areas who live in food deserts and are suffering from obesity and are locked into that system where they can only get ultra-processed foods, which are aggravating the problem? This will be a lifesaver to them.
So, Carl, what's happened, I guess the companies now have agreed to sell these drugs. They're actually called injectable GLP-1 products for $245 a month for people on Medicare and Medicaid, as well as those who use Trump RX. It's all expected to launch early this year, or early next year, rather. What do you make of this? And, what does this tell us about the price of drugs if they can sort of discount them this much, and I assume they can still make money on them?
Well, that's the thing that jumps off the page at you, right? When you read this, it's $1,000 a month now for these Ozempic and these other anti-obesity drugs, which are potentially a game changer in human history. I mean, a pill, and that's coming next year. A pill, they're injections now. The pill will be here next year. It's in trials now. To make people thin again. It's just, make America thin again. Who knew? And I suppose the president will notice. He'll start taking these drugs. I suspect, if J.B. Pritzker really wants to run against Gavin Newsom, Tom, and Gavin Newsom is trim and handsome and athletic, your governor is not. JB's going to have to start taking these drugs, and now JB can afford them.
You're right, because he couldn't before.
Yeah, so they'll be trying to afford. But I digress. Danny's point, yeah. So the pharmaceutical companies can still make money cutting the price, by 500%. That brings out the Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren in you, doesn't it? And then the other thing is that, Trump administration seems like an unlikely. Is he a conservative? Is he economic conservative. Where are we, Andy, right now in these parties? You and I talk about this. You have avowedly communist people. They don't use that word, but they say they're socialists or democratic socialists, but they espouse, Marxism, and they quote Lenin, they quote Gene Debs. So communists in the Democratic Party winning elections, and Republicans bragging about how they took a share in Intel, they nationalized industries, they jawboned companies into doing their bidding. It's like nobody believes in the free market anymore. And that's another sort of development that comes out of this.
Yeah. Tom, is this I agree with Carl on that. It does seem like, is there any part of their economy that where the problem isn't, how did Mondami put it? The problem isn't too large or too small for government to solve.
No problem's too large and no concerns too small, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Look, Trump may not be a hardline economic conservative, but he's not a communist. I mean,
no, we think maybe he's a national socialist, and I don't.
Well, look, I mean, this is Trump's effort to deal with affordability and bringing down prescription drug prices has been George W. Bush was on that as well. It's been a concern of the American people for a long time. I mean, the thing that jumped out to me, and which is less a I was going to say less a policy question. Maybe it is a policy question. In the story that I read on this, which was an AP story, that 100 million people suffer from obesity. We only have 330 million people in the country. So a third of the country is obese. I mean,
well, that would have to include you and me, Tom, but not Andy. I mean, if we're going to get the numbers that high.
I can definitely look. I can definitely stand to lose a few pounds. There's no question about that. But I've also read these stories about people who have taken these GLPs and there have been side effects and it hasn't been great. I just don't. The idea. This sort of falls into the category of the idea that we solve problems by taking pills, whatever they are, mental illness, mental health challenges. We just medicate ourselves. I mean, and ultimately it seems to me there are no shortcuts. If you're overweight, you need to be able to do two things. Number one is you have to, eat healthier and in lesser portions. I mean, that's 80% of it. And then 20% of it is you got to get off the couch and you got to get off your phone and you got to exercise. And that's the way that you can lose weight in a healthy way that's sustainable. And there are no side effects, negative side effects to that. I just feel like this is kind of feeling the whole mentality of like, what, I'm just going to eat whatever I want, get as fat as I want, and then I'm just going to take a pill and it's all going to be better. And then I'll just keep eating crap because I can, and I'll just take more pills. And I mean, I just don't.
Tom, that's not new. That's what statin drugs are, right? You lower cholesterol, and then you can still eat as many hot dogs at the ball game as you want.
It's just
I'm speaking from experience,
which is why
But wait a minute,
understand.
Tom. But what you're talking about is what Marty McCary's been saying, and he's also in the administration. He's the new. Trump brought him in. He was he's the John Hopkins physician. He says this, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. has been saying.
I was just going to say, isn't that what RFK Jr. was just saying like a few months ago and years ago, and suddenly he's like, "This is awesome. This is a great thing that we're going to be pumping out these, pills and injections to people."
Right, and in order to justify that and forestall and in anticipation of this criticism that you and I are about to level at him, he said, "But this, these people live in food deserts, so they can't get healthy food." And I actually would question that. Washington D.C., there are tough neighborhoods here. There are poor neighborhoods, but one of them, there's a Whole Foods a mile away. I mean, in rural America, he's telling me that people only can get ultra processed food. I'm a little skeptical of that rationalization of that.
Well, but I mean, but it does make sense. I mean, if this stuff is $1,400 or $1,500 a month, like only rich people can actually.
I get that part of the argument.
Yeah, but, I mean that's real, and we do have a two-tiered healthcare system, and if you're rich, you can get the best coverage and the best doctors and the best medicine that money could buy. But that's always been true throughout human history, I'm sure. So that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple points on this. One is that if this is in fact preventative medicine, if you think that by losing weight. It's better for your joints. It's better for your heart. It may be that in the grand scheme of things, this falls under that rubric of preventative medicine and saves us not only human suffering, but money in the long term. But it also raises the question, and it's always been the problem with healthcare, is it points out that there is no sort of elasticity to the demand, or rather there is full elasticity. There's always something on the horizon that people will want and need for their health, and there's no sort of price which people will be unwilling to pay, and there's no substitute, right, other than exercise, which would be out of the question, Tom.
Right.
This is America.
They live in gym deserts.
Right.
Right. They live in gym deserts. So it does make you think that, the price of healthcare in this country is just going to continue going up, and things like this drug, which very expensive, and even though they're selling it to the consumer at a lesser price, I'm not sure who's eating all the difference here, whether the government ends up subsidizing it to some extent, but someone has to pay for these drugs. There is no free drugs even when they cap the price. So it'll be interesting to watch, but it is not the free market in action. I will say that, Tom. It does seem like this is, again, if we were going to sort of go on and on about Mondami and the Democrats messing with the economy, there's a lot of messing with the economy going on the Republican side right now.
Yeah, sure. I don't disagree with that. But again, this is one of those things that as a political matter, if you're saying, okay, Republicans, look, you just got your asses kicked because people think you don't care about them, and they're telling you they're distressed economically and they need help and they need things to be more affordable. What's your response, Republicans? That may require, doing some things that aren't necessarily, I'm not sure there's a purity test on free market purity test on those policies. They're going to do what they have to do to try and help people out.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, and we're talking about food. I want to talk about a sandwich when we come back. It's a Subway sandwich. We'll be back after this. As promised, the protester who threw a sandwich at a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer in Washington, D.C. last August has been found not guilty after 7 hours of deliberation. It was a D.C. jury that found Sean Dunn not guilty of misdemeanor assault. Carl, the argument was in part that throwing the sandwich was a protest and it is protected under the First Amendment. What do you make of the verdict, and what do you make of the crime?
The jury wouldn't comment afterwards. The jurors wouldn't comment. So we don't know what they decided. It amounted to jury nullification. You obviously can't have a city where people can, with impunity, throw sandwiches at other people. And, this guy, he was, Mr. Dunn was a paralegal at the Justice Department. The Jeannie Pirro, the new U.S. attorney in Washington, sought felony charges of interfering with ICE, interfering with obstruction of justice, interfering with an assault on a peace officer. And the guy admitted he was trying to draw ICE officers away from their duties. So he sort of, when he was arrested, sort of copped to the element of that. The grand jury wouldn't go along with that, and they reduced it to misdemeanor assault. It was obviously a misdemeanor assault. There were a couple of mitigating factors as the trial progressed, though. One of them was the ICE agent testified that the sandwich exploded on his chest, and he could feel it through. Explode. And he could feel it through his Kevlar vest. Except then the defense introduced a picture of the sandwich lying largely intact on the sidewalk, which didn't help the prosecution. Another factor was that he was teased about it in the station room. The throwing of the sandwich, the lefties put up murals of him protest, with his mask on, tossing this sandwich like he's a hero, like it's like a Che Guevara and it's a hand grenade against the fascists. But his own friends did the same thing, tease him about it, give him a T-shirt. He wasn't hurt. So I think the jury and he got fired from his job, which he certainly should have been. And I think the jury kind of came, no harm, no foul. He's in riot gear. He tossed a sandwich. Wasn't really an assault. It kind of makes sense in the facts of that case, and the jurors who wanted to acquit could point to the factors that I just mentioned. The problem is this. So now you have a city where people can, as a matter of law, it's been established, go around throwing sandwiches at people with whom they disagree politically and calling them fascists and calling them names. I don't think that's probably what the jury intended, but that's that's the problem with these charges being brought in these very liberal, very politically charged cities against police, and on behalf of progressives. So it's a little disquieting, but as the trial unfolded, it made a little more sense than it sounds like from a distance.
Tom, you see it that way?
Well, it is a little disquieting because then I was thinking about this case. I'm like, okay, well, what if he'd hit him in the face instead of the chest? Would that have qualified as a?
What if it had been a toasted sandwich?
Well, I was going to say, or what if the sandwich was stale?
But what if it's
Subway
next time
prides
it's not a
themselves on
sandwich?
fresh bread.
What if it's a pie? Can you throw pies in people's faces and that's acceptable? I mean, it opens the door to all sorts of questions and about where this goes. To Carl's point, that's why it's disquieting. It's like, okay, so now we have it is established that you can throw a Subway sandwich and hit a guy in the chest, but it puts you on a slippery slope that you don't want to be on. And unfortunately, the jurors did not. Yeah, the guy lost his job. That's fine. That probably should have happened. But he should also be held accountable, even if it's just community service. I mean, even if it's just something that draws a line in the sand that you can't do this and just, walk away. But unfortunately, they didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, there was this other sort of serious side of it, Carl, which we've got a piece on the front page of Real Clear Politics today. You can find it. It's from the Federalist. It's a piece by Rachel Bovard, and she's talking about Arctic frost, which we've talked about a little bit on this program. And she writes this. She says, to conservatives, Arctic frost is a scandal. To Democrats, it's their new baseline. And the only way to stop it is to punish them. But she goes on to say that, maybe you can't get these convictions in these very liberal cities. So to that point, is there a more serious thing going on here, which is that in these liberal jurisdictions, you not only have liberal judges, but you have liberal juries as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. Roger Stone was convicted in Washington of a process crime that had to do with, this whole Russia. I don't want to say Russia hoax, but it kind of was a hoax. And then there was a lawyer, from the administration who was charged, and with some, he was charged with lying about whether he was representing Hillary Clinton or not, another process crime. And in my view, neither one of them should have been prosecuted, but they were. And in the second one, the Democratic lawyer, his lawyer didn't even put him on the stand. The jury just acquitted him. And there's a presumption there, never discussed at the time, that if you're facing a jury in Washington and the crime has a political element to it, if you're a Republican, you're screwed. If you're a Democrat, you're in pretty good shape. That's not sustainable in the long run. And that's another thing that came out of this that we use that word disquieting. That's a mild way of thinking of it. Sean Charles Dunn, the defendant here, also that he worked for the Justice Department is not a minor thing. Conservatives point, well, this is an example of the deep state. He's a Justice Department lawyer. He's paid for by the taxpayers. He sees these ICE people, National Guard, police, whatever. He's screaming at them, "You're a fascist! Get out of our city!" Well, that's not the kind of person you want working for the Justice Department.
It's almost like an attorney general wishing his opponent's kids and wife died.
Yeah.
Who would vote for that? Yeah.
No, well,
the top law enforcement official in the state of Virginia.
That could never happen, right?
No, never.
Not. Well, guys, you know what? I don't have the sound now, and I'm not going to try to do it.
Tom can do it.
My office.
Tom can do it.
Not be serious.
There you go. It is time for You Cannot Be Serious. It's the way we wrap up the week. It's a story or a tale or something that caught your eye this week and makes your head scratch, I guess. So, Tom, let's go to you first. What's your You Cannot Be
Well, we
Serious
should
for
do
the
me
week?
first because it fits into what we've been talking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Oh,
Carl,
okay.
go to you
All
first.
right.
See, we don't know what they are. That's part of the game here.
Well, so yesterday, PETA, the People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, they have their headquarters on 16th Street. It's right next to our office. They have a big elephant out front. And I'm not a PETA fan. First of all, I could never give up, smoked salmon or, other delicacies. But they've really campaigned against horse racing, which just bothers me. I love horse racing. But having said that, they're the most lovely people, and we share this wall with them, a space with them. Always friendly. I've known people from that organization through the years. They are the most idealistic, committed, sweet people, and they were picketed yesterday by a small but loud mob. They have bullhorns. And until yesterday, I didn't realize bullhorn. That's a good name for it because it's bullying behavior. They're screaming and shouting. They went into the property of PETA. They went up on their door, shouting, pounding on their door, yelling at them because these were pro-Hamas demonstrators because PETA hasn't taken a stand on Israel. This is a group that doesn't even get into politics. They care about animal rights, and they were shouting. Sheep are being slaughtered by the IDF in Palestinian lands, and you don't care. You're hypocrites. And Jake Bevan, a young man who works for us, sort of casually remarked, so the pro-Hamas demonstrations have now reached. Now we're in South. It's South Park now. They've reached the South Park threshold. So people who care about Palestinian civilians being harmed, God bless you. But people who want to harass PETA because they haven't spoken out against on a foreign policy issue that they know nothing about, you cannot be serious.
Tom, we got about 3 minutes here. So
Yeah, I know. We got to go quick. Well, look, I usually use You Cannot Be Serious the last few times to bash Democrats and Mayor Johnson. But this week, a Republican did something that was really dumb. And that is Lauren Boebert, the Republican rep from Colorado. Her Halloween costume, ABC News reported that she went to a Halloween party as a Mexican woman, and her boyfriend dressed as an ICE agent with the vest and the camo and all of that. And she carried a sign that said, "Word of the day, juicy," Juicy. And then underneath it said, "Tell me if juicy ice coming," which is, let's say, insensitive to say the least. I mean, this is one of those. What's that?
that's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's not she's an elected official in the United States Congress, and so it's astonishing that she thought that was in any way appropriate. So, Lauren Boebert, you cannot be serious.
All right. Well, we just have about a minute left here. So mine actually is oversees the Louvre Museum. Specifically their security team. These back in October, these thieves made off with these jewels, and that's pretty bad. But it turns out that the password of the Louvre Museum's video surveillance system is Louvre. So at least it's not mot de passe, which is French for password, but still.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, for our French friends, you cannot be serious. That's our program for today. It's been a great week here. It's been great to be part of the new Megyn Kelly channel on Sirius XM. We're on the radio now every day at 11 a.m. Eastern, so listen there. Or if you're on YouTube or the podcast platforms, remember to subscribe, like us, send us a comment. I do read them. I always enjoy the feedback. Special shout out this week to our new producer, Carrie, and to Jake, our video producer. Both have had to do a lot of work this week, and we do appreciate it. Neither one of them has quit yet, so hopefully we'll be back with them next week. But we do appreciate their help. I'm Andrew Walworth. We'll be back here on Monday. Hope to see you then. Have a great weekend.